Hi, everybody, and thanks again for joining us in HerStory Circle Conference 2020. Wow, what a phenomenal experience. I'm actually HerStory chairman for the United Kingdom, and I'm so proud to be part of this movement. And thank you so much, Gertrude, my chair. It means so much for us and all the women that have sort of managed to join in. This is my story. My name is Jennifer Lizzie Ngulube, MBE, appointed member of the British Empire. It sounds very fancy, but this is how I got where I am today. I was born and brought up in Zimbabwe, a very small village, right in the middle of the War of Liberation. So my childhood was really not much of a childhood. My childhood was all about surviving and ducking and diving, hiding from liberation fighters. I didn't have toys or any fancy things that children have as they grow up. But what I remember very well from that time was this time when I came back from school and found my mom on the floor. She was extremely ill. So she had to be whisked to hospital. And before she left, she looked me in the eye and she said, Jenny, you have to be strong. You have to take care of your siblings. I was only 12. If it was normal times, I would have said maybe, it was doable. But that was still right in the middle of the war. This 12-year-old had to step into a mother's shoes to become a mother, to become a carer, to wake up in the morning, make breakfast, make sure the kids are safe and take them to school. Nighttime was challenging because we used to have very stray people coming into the homes. See, word goes around very quickly that there's children who live by themselves. So I had to learn to hush my siblings, hide them under the bed. Each time we had an encounter from an armed man seeking food from whoever was there to open the door. So I had also learned from my mother that when you prepare food, you keep a spare plate just in case you have some gunmen coming at night to look for food. See, this was a time that sort of made a very fundamental mark in my life. Later on in life, when I got married and life settled, and I thought I had it all, very comfortable, very well-to-do husband. But as life has it, our country went through very difficult times. I found myself, my husband at the time, and my children moving to the United Kingdom, which was a rude awakening. Much as I thought life was hard in Zimbabwe, I wasn't prepared for what I had to face when I got to the United Kingdom. When suddenly you feel like even your very English you speaking is not is not adequate because of your accent, and the shock of having to find I had no childcare, I had nothing to support me, and the whole pressure of everything else took a strain on my marriage. And one fateful day, when my husband came back from work, he said, Jenny, I can't do this anymore. And I said, what do you mean you can't do this anymore? He says, I'm leaving. Ladies, you can imagine, I hadn't been working. He was the breadwinner. I'm in a foreign country. I have 4 children to my name. What do you mean you are leaving? And yes, he left. If crying would have solved the problem, I would have cried buckets full of tears, but I was just too numb. I was just too numb to even think. But as life had to go on, I quickly had to pick up myself and try as much as possible to look after myself and my children. But our breadwinner had gone. Before long, that fateful knock on the door came. You are in areas and we need to repossess this property. You haven't paid for your accommodation for a number of months. What was I thinking? I was so used to being taken care of, and somehow, you live in denial. You think it's going to be okay. It wasn't going to be okay. So there I was, myself, 4 children, out on a cold January morning, black bin liners filled with our little belongings, out on the street with nowhere to go. That moment I will never wish on anyone. To see your children look at you and ask, Mommy, what's going on? And you have no answer. So I took my phone, went through my phone book, called a few of my friends that I had made in the country. But who would want a mother and 4 kids to accommodate? All I got was, sorry, Jenny, we're so sorry about your situation, but we can't help you. Friend number 2, same story. Friend number 4, same story. So eventually I rang the church that we used to attend. And what I heard was music to my ears at the time. The pastor said, Jenny, do you know there's accommodation for homeless families? I said, what is that? We don't have such in Zimbabwe. And he gave me a direction where to go. So hence, I found myself and my 4 children in a shelter for homeless people, which is where one day I sat and said, this is it. I have to build myself up. I have to pick myself up. I remember one particular morning when I was sitting and I remembered Maya Angelou's voice when she said, some things happen for us and some things happen to us. I said, I'm snapping out of this. I have to find a way out. I quickly found a job. I quickly picked myself up, but it wasn't no longer about me finding a job to pay my bills. Something had happened inside me. I found myself at crossroads. I realized that I needed to find not just a job to pay my bills. I needed to find something to fill my soul. This is where they say a job is what you paid for, but a calling is what you are made for. This is how, ladies, I embarked on my career to look after children in difficult circumstances. Because of that very childhood that I had, that very young girl who at 12 learned to nurture her siblings, that very young mom who found herself out on a cold pavement with all her belongings and her children, had so much to give. I decided I'll be a foster carer. I took in children into my home, very damaged children. I'll tell you about 1 or 2 of them. I remember this particular girl. I was told to come and pick her up from hospital. I happily drove to hospital, and when I got there, what met my eyes was very shocking. That made me think, you know what? You always say life is hard, but you've got no idea what you're talking about. This little girl had bandages wrapped right all over her body. The only thing I could see were just her eyes. And all she said to me was, my mommy did this to me. So I carefully lifted this little girl and took her home and nurtured her. And I learned a lot from that little girl. Much as she was hurting, she had burns all over because mom had poured a boiling kettle of water all over her. But what I learned from that little girl was the fighting spirit. All she wanted was to play. No matter how much pain she was in, she would try by all means to squeeze her little body out of the bandages. She would try by all means. She was very chatty. And sometimes it brought a lot of tears to my eyes to see such a young little girl fighting for her dear life, but at the same time, having so much fight in herself. That taught me something. We all have that fight in us. So when all else fails, I will encourage all of you to think about that little fighting spirit you've got inside. We all have got it. It is there. We are born with it. Sometimes we're just so complacent, we let it die, but it is there. It is part of our nature. I will tell you of another boy. This boy had been locked in a cupboard and had no human contact at all until he was discovered. So he was very, almost like an animal, he didn't develop because of lack of interaction. But the moment he came into my care and we started interacting with him, he blossomed. He also started to learn to talk. He was such a hilarious young person. That taught me something as well. There is power in community. There is power in togetherness, which is precisely why I am so grateful for this platform that Gertrude has created, because together as women, we are very powerful. Together as women, our stories are very, very powerful. Let's not think our stories are not big enough. There's no story that's not that's small. There's no story that's too big. This is my story. I could go on and on, but the end of it is I'll go back to how I introduced myself. How did I become the member of the British Empire? It is all through this hard life that I've had. This hard life that taught me something. This hard life that taught me to be resilient. So when I was faced with challenges in looking after children that were very, very challenging, I didn't give up because that's what I wanted to do. I really just didn't want to, just a job. I needed to give back to society. So I ended up being appointed as a member of the British Empire because of the services to the children that I've looked after, a job that I'm very proud of. So what I would say to you is when you are going through stuff, you must one day sit and think, what was it saying to me? What was the message? What did I get out of it? My very difficult childhood taught me to nurture. I'm a nurturer through and through. Give me any challenging child, they will thrive in my care. Give me any challenging situation, I'll rise up above it. But I wasn't always like that. Like I said earlier on, I was so dependent on my wealthy husband until he left me in the cold, disappeared in the sunset with another young lady. I thank him for that. I thank all the difficulties that I've had in my life. I thank and embrace all the adversities because I am one very happy lady who goes to bed very happy, very secluded, because I know I've done a good day's job when I put my head down to sleep. Thank you so much, ladies, and thank you so much, Gertrude. Awesome movement. Let's keep going. Thank you.